Today, we dive into the story of a killer considered the most terrifying in American history, with the highest recorded body count of any serial murderer. He was arrested over 100 times across 24 different states, yet slipped through the cracks of justice time and again, until the horrifying truth came to light. His name is Samuel Little, a man who claimed at least 93 lives, and possibly many more. Brace yourselves, because this tale will drag you into a dark world where brutality knows no bounds. Samuel Little wasn't born a monster, or perhaps he was, carrying darkness in his soul from the very beginning. In 1940, in a small Georgia town, he came into the world, delivered by a mother he later called a prostitute. His childhood was a maze of despair, no home, no love, just loneliness and twisted thoughts. Neighbors whispered that they'd seen young Little standing for hours by the riverbank, staring into the black water as if waiting for something. And then it came, his first kill, a small animal. The feeling of blood trickling through his fingers made him smile. As he grew, Little left home, drifting like a ghost across America. From Ohio to California, Texas to Florida, he moved endlessly, unnoticed. Behind his friendly grin and calm gaze, a monster was waking up. Samuel Little didn't kill at random. He hunted like a predator, patient, cold, and ruthless. His prey? The forgotten ones, prostitutes shivering under dim streetlights, addicts trembling in stinking alleys, homeless women asleep on park benches. To him, they weren't people, they were toys to break. Picture a rainy night in Miami, 1971. A young woman in a torn red dress stands under an awning, dodging the icy drops. The streetlight flickers, casting her tired face in shadow. Then, an old truck rolls up, window creaking down. Samuel Little leans out, flashing a warm smile. "It's cold out here, hop in, I'll give you a ride." She hesitates, but hunger and the chill push her to nod. It's the last choice she'll ever make. The truck veers onto a desolate road, and everything shifts. His smile vanishes, replaced by a gaze sharp as a blade. He pulls over by a black swamp, the hum of frogs blending with the rain. She senses danger, fumbles for the door, but it's too late. His massive hands clamp around her throat, fingers digging into soft flesh. She thrashes, nails raking his skin, but he just laughs, a warped, guttural sound, savoring every second of her pain. Little didn't need weapons, his hands were death itself. He squeezed, muscles bulging, veins popping under his skin. He later said he loved watching their eyes, seeing the light flicker and die, like a candle snuffed out in a storm. To him, it wasn't murder, it was a ritual, a moment where he ruled life and death. When she stopped breathing, he didn't rush off. He hauled her body out, wading into the swamp, water lapping at his knees. He stood there in the pitch-black night, watching her pale face sink beneath the muck. Bubbles rose, then silence. He muttered something, no one knows what, then wiped his hands on his shirt, climbed back in, and drove away, leaving the swamp to guard his secret. That wasn't the only time. He did it dozens of times, from LA's neon streets to Texas's empty fields. No knives, no guns, no messy blood trails. Just cold bodies dumped in forests, under bridges, or in rotting landfills. And the worst part? He remembered them all, every face, every outfit, every final scream. What turns this tale from horrifying to downright maddening is that Samuel Little didn't just kill, he danced through the cracks of justice like a phantom. For over 3 decades, from the shadowed streets of the 1970s to the dawn of the 2000s, he was hauled in by police more than 100 times across 24 states. Theft, assault, battery, his rap sheet was a mile long, a ledger of petty crimes that barely scratched the surface of his true nature. Yet every single time, the handcuffs came off, the cell door swung open, and he walked free. Why? Because no one could fathom that this scruffy drifter, this nobody with a crooked smile, was a predator cloaked in human skin. His victims didn't help the case against him. They were the invisible ones women's society had already turned its back on. Prostitutes whose disappearances went unnoticed, addicts whose families had given up, drifters like him who left no trace. When their bodies were found, sometimes years later, half buried in ditches or rotting under bridges, the clues had vanished. Rain washed away blood, wind scattered bones, and time erased any hope of justice. The police shrugged, filed the cases away, and moved on. Meanwhile, Little kept moving too, a ghost slipping from state to state, his hands stained with blood no one bothered to see. But it wasn't just negligence that saved him, it was disbelief. Take 1976, a humid night in St. Louis. A young woman staggered into a police station, her neck ringed with purple bruises, her voice trembling as she sobbed out her story. She'd been waiting for a bus when a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a disarming grin, offered her a ride. Minutes later, in a dark alley, his hands were around her throat, squeezing the life from her. She fought, clawed, screamed until a passing car's headlights spooked him, and he fled. She ran to the cops, pointing into the night, begging them to catch him. The officer behind the desk barely looked up. "You're imagining things, sweetheart," he said with a smirk. "Probably just a bad date." They wrote a report, tossed it in a drawer, and forgot her. The next morning, Samuel Little walked out of that same station. He'd been picked up nearby for loitering, questioned for an hour, and let go with a warning. As he stepped into the foggy dawn, he turned back, his lips curling into that same crooked smile, a predator savoring his escape. The woman's pleas echoed in his mind, but not out of guilt. To him, it was a game, and he'd won again. That night, he was back on the road, tires humming on the highway, eyes scanning for his next prey. She wasn't the only one who got away, others survived too, their stories dismissed, their bruises fading while his trail of bodies grew longer. Every arrest was a taunt, every release a victory. In California, he beat a woman unconscious and left her for dead. She woke up, stumbled to safety, but the cops called it a lover's spat. In Ohio, he was caught with stolen goods, spent a week in jail, then vanished before anyone connected the dots. In Texas, a farmer found a shallow grave near his field. By the time police arrived, Little was 3 states away, laughing at their ignorance. Over 100 chances to stop him, and over 100 failures. The system didn't just fail his victims, it handed him the keys to keep killing. It wasn't until 2012, when Little was nabbed at a Kentucky shelter for drugs, that the truth started unraveling. His DNA matched 3 LA murders from the 1980s, Carol Elford, Guadalupe Apodaca, and Audrey Nelson. In 2014, he got life without parole. But the real horror came in 2018, in a cold prison room, when Samuel Little opened his mouth, and what he said froze America to its core. He recounted every kill with sickening detail. "She wore a red dress, I met her in Miami, 71. I choked her in the swamp, heard the water splash as she fought." He sketched over 50 portraits from memory, beautiful faces frozen in their last terror. He claimed 93 victims, from 1970 to 2005, across 19 states. The worst part? He showed no remorse. He grinned as he spoke, like these were his fondest memories. Samuel Little died in 2020, taking countless secrets to his grave. Investigators confirmed 50 of his 93 confessed kills, but some believe the true count could hit 200. His drawings remain the only clues, many faces still nameless. The scariest part isn't how many he killed, it's how he hid among us for decades. A monster in plain sight, chatting with neighbors, hands still stained with blood. He proves evil doesn't need horns, just a smile. Samuel Little's gone, but his story scars America's history. He reminds us darkness can lurk anywhere, even in the faces we trust. What do you think of this killer? Drop your thoughts below, and if you want more chilling tales, hit like and subscribe. See you in the next nightmare.